a heartbreaking loss in the world of country music. Singer Naomi Judd of the Grammy-winning mother-daughter duo The Judds has...
The world was startled by Naomi Judd's death, but what the autopsy showed was much more unsettling. Wounds, quiet, followed by a note allegedly blaming her own daughter. Behind the glitz and splendor was a household silently disintegrating, a lady fighting invisible agony. What actually occurred during Naomi's last hours, and what unsettling realities did she carry with her? This is the aspect of the Judd legacy that was never captured on video. Let's find out. She was one of the most well-known figures in country music and a member of America's country music family. However, beneath Naomi Judd's brilliance, most of her fans were unaware of the lifetime of suffering behind her glittering fame and smile. Her passing startled the globe, but what followed was what left everyone dumbfounded. The autopsy report revealed things no one had anticipated, not simply what many had feared. What was the impact of country music? Legend ended up scarred, alone, and with a parting message that allegedly blamed her own daughter? And why would a fan-favorite woman spend so much time fighting such sinister demons? To comprehend the findings of the autopsy report and the significance of them, we must begin with the Judds themselves. Naomi Judd was more than just well-known. Many people believe that she was the matriarch of the first family in modern country music. She didn't inherit her fame. Naomi, who was born Diana Ellen Judd in 1946, worked before ever stepping onto the stage. She worked as a Nashville nurse. Only when she was with her Winona, the daughter, began singing as soon as lightning struck. Naomi's voice, their voices, Winona's strength and warmth combined to create a sound that was both classic and unadulterated. They identified as the Judds, and they were unstoppable almost immediately. Throughout the early 1980s and early 1990s, the Judds were a household name. They sent out song after hit, including "Grandpa, Tell Me About the Good Old Days, Why Not Me?" and "Mama, He's Crazy" days. These weren't merely #1 songs. They were tunes that felt intimate, like country anthems. Stories and songs that people clung to. During a period of transition in country music, the Judds were sympathetic. They sold more than 20 million records over their lifetime. One earned more than a dozen #1 hits on the Billboard country charts in addition to 5 Grammy Awards. They were more than just entertainers to their fans. Winona and Naomi were regarded as a representation of tenacity, mother and daughter standing together, navigating celebrity together and supporting one another. However, what the viewers failed to notice was that this ideal pair was frequently kept together by force rather than harmony. Winona and Naomi have a bond that could be described as flammable. They have a profound love for one another. However, they frequently had a contentious relationship. The demands of traveling, celebrity, and their relationship was strained by trauma, which was concealed from the public for many years. Later on, both women would talk candidly about their disagreements, their emotional outbursts, and the extended silences that occasionally occurred between them. Even the bond between Naomi and Ashley Judd, her younger daughter, was difficult. Ashley later achieved fame as an actress in Hollywood. However, she also talked openly about her upbringing in what she once called a dysfunctional home. Ashley has openly disclosed that she experienced emotional distress as a child after being abandoned. Unrest in the household. These facts were verified by sources other than tabloids. Several autobiographies and interviews. The focal point of this complex household was Naomi, a woman who was constantly grinning in public but often tearing up in private. Naomi battled serious mental illness, such as depression, throughout her life. First anxiety, then bipolar disorder. She made no secret of this. Actually, one of the few country musicians in her generation to publicly talk about her condition was her. However, avoiding discomfort is not the same as talking about it. Naomi's mental state was precarious, and it became more evident over the years that she was experiencing ongoing psychological pain beneath her glitzy public image. Naomi left performing in 1991 following a lengthy and prosperous career. Identified as having hepatitis C, a chronic liver condition that she allegedly acquired while serving as a nurse. She was given only a few years to live by her doctors. However, Naomi outperformed the odds, went into remission, and later became an advocate for mental health. She conducted interviews, authored books, and persisted in making appearances at public gatherings, constantly encouraging people to treat mental illness seriously. However, despite her efforts to assist others, she continued to lose the war against herself. Then, in 2022, an unforeseen event occurred. Naomi Judd returned to the spotlight. In an effort to commemorate, she and Winona arranged a farewell tour. Their heritage. It was a happy moment for the fans. It was anxiety on Naomi that she might not have been prepared for. Only a few weeks before Naomi passed away, the tour was announced. Looking back, she appeared overwhelmed, unpredictable, and emotionally spent, according to several of her close friends and family. However, none was ready for what came next. The Judds were scheduled to be inducted just one day earlier. Naomi Judd was discovered dead at home and inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Additionally, during the autopsy weeks later, a report was made public, confirming the heartbreaking fact that Naomi Judd had committed herself. But it disclosed more than that. The state in which her body was discovered, the drugs she was using, and the physical evidence she left behind all pointed to a tale that was much more intricate and unsettling than anyone had anticipated. The day of Naomi Judd's death, even those who believed they were prepared were taken aback by the autopsy findings. It wasn't only Naomi's confirmation. Judd had committed suicide. It disclosed personal, extremely disturbing information about her last moments, her physical state, and the perhaps years-long emotional suffering she has been concealing. Despite being a medical file, it read like a confession, with each page retraction. The curtain on one of the most recognizable personalities in country music. The precise position of the injury. The previous scars after surgery. The list of drugs that were discovered in her body. And possibly the most devastating of all, a purportedly handwritten letter to her daughter Winona, pointing fingers at the last hour of her life. Why would a woman spend hours away from one of her greatest accolades? Life, entry into the Country Music Hall of Fame, decide to call it quits? According to the Nashville Medical Examiner's Office's official report, Naomi Judd was found by her family inside her house on April 30th at 10:57 in the morning, to be exact. Emergency personnel were contacted right away, and Williamson Medical Center was the destination of her transportation. Only a few hours after her discovery, at 12:35 p.m., she was declared dead. The following day, she and Winona were to be formally inducted into the Hall of Fame. The report's physical details are heartbreaking despite being clinical. The injury was explained as coming in from the scalp's right side, 2.5 inches below the head's crown, and 4 3/4 inches from the front midline to the right. After that, it traveled through other regions of the brain, more especially the frontal and temporal lobes, which control emotion and decision-making. The item left 5.5 inches to the left of the head, and 2 inches below the crown of the skull. The middle line. The report stated that this path ran from right to left, and was somewhat upward. There were no foreign objects found inside the skull, indicating a full escape. Normally, only forensic experts can read these kinds of complex subtleties. However, in this instance, they've been released to the public. Additionally, they depict not just Naomi's demise, but what she had to deal with prior to that. At the time, She wore white slacks with a white waistline secured with a safety pin, a blue robe and a shirt. No indications of an outside disturbance were present. She had uncovered hands, or kept for the purpose of gathering evidence, which is usually what would be done if there was reason to believe that someone else was involved. This clearly shows that there were no indications of a struggle. There was no indication of foul play, and the scenario fit the description of a self-directed act. Investigators moreover observed a blue pillow and bedsheet that had been brought with her during transportation. Again, all indications that she passed away alone in her own house. However, some of the most startling information concerned her physique rather than the reason of death itself. Several previous cosmetic treatments are mentioned in the report. There was a noticeable linear scar on Naomi, along her scalp, extending from the area just above her right ear to the crown and concluding close to the left temple. This is in line with having a facelift done surgically. The scars surrounding her eyes were lesser, recommending the eyelid surgery known as blepharoplasty. Permanent tattoos had been applied to her lips and eyebrows. Pigment, as well as her hairline, a style decision similarly exhibited by Michael Jackson and other superstars. Used when wearing wigs to keep the look of a full hairline or to conceal thinning hair. Both an inside examination and external palpation verified that she also had breast implants. Several linear scars, including a stomach tuck scar that ran from hip to hip, were seen on both knees, most likely signifying prior cosmetic surgery or a surgical fix. She had French-tipped acrylics applied to her well-maintained nails. Her toenails were painted a delicate shade of pink. It appeared to be the body at first of a performer, carefully kept up as she approached her late 80s. However, the list of drugs discovered in her system indicates something much more intricate than an fixation on appearance. According to toxicology findings, she had been consuming a mix of strong neurological and psychiatric drugs, such as venlafaxine, MCPP, memantine, primidone, and trazodone. These aren't drugs for fun. They're prescribed to treat illnesses like bipolar disorder, severe depressive disorder, sleeplessness, preventing seizures, and memory problems associated with Alzheimer's disease. A popular antidepressant for mood disorders is venlafaxine. It is common to prescribe trazodone for anxiety and despair, however it can also result in excessive sedation. Primidone has anticonvulsant properties. It implies that she might have used it to control mood swings or that she may have had a history of seizures. Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia are typically treated with memantine, and its presence sparked speculation regarding Naomi's possible early cognitive impairment. MCPP, or M-chlorophenylpiperazine, was a hallucinogenic drug that was known to interact with amounts of serotonin. It can occasionally be a side effect of other drugs, but it has also been connected to distorted perception and dysregulation of emotions. Although not prohibited, its effects are similar to stimulants and hallucinogens, and how they usually show up in an autopsy implies either metabolic issues or the usage of several conflicting medications. To put it plainly, Naomi Judd was handling a challenging and maybe hazardous combination of drugs, each of which alone may result in sleepiness, disorientation, or unstable emotions. When combined, they might have intensified depressive symptoms. This is consistent with the observations made by her friends and family in the weeks preceding her passing. According to some people close to Naomi, she had appeared more unpredictable, emotionally unstable, and worn out. The stress of taking the stage again, even though her delicate mental state and weakened health could have led to a psychological emergency. Only recently had the farewell tour been revealed. She was going to be respected by the music industry. All of that attention, though, would have seemed excessive. The report's reference to a note discovered close to her is among its most contentious features. Body. Although the complete contents have not yet been made public, it has been generally reported that the note was allegedly directed at Winona and included personal reflections and abrasive language. Fans were taken aback by this revelation because they had always assumed that despite their complexity, Naomi and Winona were, in the end, inseparable. The notion that Naomi's last letter could questions that may never be fully addressed have been raised by her criticism of her daughter. Nevertheless, the same, silent reality lies underlying all of these forensic and medical terms. It hurt Naomi Judd. She was physically, emotionally, and psychologically overpowered. She had suffered from hepatitis C's after effects, fought bipolar disorder for years, and was found to have persistent lung irritation, which made singing more challenging. The return, the strain, and the millions of onlookers were just too much. However, the most perplexing query still stands: why now? On the eve of such a great honor, why? Why, considering that she was already halfway through getting ready for her last tour? Reports and scans are not able to provide answers to these queries. However, they do highlight the pressure of performing in front of an audience, the thin line separating happiness and sadness, and how a legend might be lost to silence rather than scandal. "I miss her, but we just don't talk." That one remark captured a daughter's survivor guilt that few fans ever noticed, the extreme emotional detachment that had characterized a large portion of their relationship in the previous years. Naomi Judd was well known for being affable in public, candid about mental health, as well as her charisma in public. However, things weren't always that smooth behind closed doors. Winona and Naomi had been touring together for decades, but long before Naomi's last days, their once strong bond had begun to deteriorate. Winona has acknowledged in public that she experiences what she refers to as survivor's guilt, a psychological reaction that frequently occurs after a close loved one passes away unexpectedly, especially when there was tension in the connection. Survivor's guilt, to put it simply, is when someone experiences intense, enduring sense of accountability for having experienced something that another person did not. For Winona, it goes beyond simply losing her mother. It also includes the burden of pursuing her life, job, and even her familial obligations while being aware Naomi has left. And she claims the emotion is still there. The fact that the two women were not communicating frequently at the time of Naomi's death has made matters worse. No major dispute arose. No dramatic breakup. Only space, slowly, growing emotional gap that neither party seems to be able to overcome. Winona explains the feeling of losing Naomi as a gradual, rather than a sudden, bizarre disintegration. "She's undoubtedly wondering where I am at home," she once said, her voice trembling. "What I'm doing. She seems to be missing the road." It makes a powerful statement. In addition to lamenting her mother's passing, Winona also picturing her in a different setting, yet emotionally connected to the stage. As said by Winona, Naomi adored the crowds, the show, and the attention. She actually thinks her mother more than she did, she needed that limelight. As Winona put it, "She loves a crowd. Even more than I do." In contrast, Winona has consistently identified as introverted. More concerned with her family and the music than with getting attention from the public. Nevertheless, she stood for years, standing next to her mother on stage, maintaining the facade that everything was all right, even when it wasn't. So why did they wind up becoming emotionally aloof? As a mother-daughter pair is not at all like a normal family bond, as Winona once clarified. It's intense. They were more than simply relatives. They were business partners, roommates, and co-workers. And entertainers. Such intimacy can either strengthen a relationship or lead to intolerable stress. Winona's thoughts, despite her grief, demonstrate how difficult it is to grieve someone when you don't feel like though you've found closure. She characterizes her feelings following Naomi's death as a mix of quiet and perplexity. She was not at peace with any final words. No farewell moment of understanding or pardon. And this adds even more complexity to the process of moving forward. Winona has made every effort to uphold her mother's legacy in public. She keeps singing their tunes. She talks about mental health. She's even promised to finish the farewell tour that they had organized together. However, she has acknowledged in private that the grieving process has been considerably more intricate than most people realize. According to her, her emotional detachment following Naomi's passing has been significant. As the world grieved for a legendary figure in music, Winona lamented a mother that she was hardly able to contact. The pair had been through everything together, including international tours, chart-topping achievements, emotional breakdowns, hospitalization as well as family counseling. Nevertheless, some things were ultimately left unsaid. In one of her most tearful interviews following Naomi's passing, Winona made a straightforward statement. But strong. I didn't think I would weep. I believe that's simply because I am currently a mother. It was a silent moment. And dealing with teenagers and paybacks are hard. Simply in retrospect, a daughter tries to comprehend the lady who brought her up, loved her, pushed her, and finally left her with more questions than answers. Just when it appeared like Winona Judd had reached the end of her misery, tragedy struck again. At home, disaster struck once more. Cactus Moser, her spouse and a musician, experienced an unexpected medical incident that prevented him from using his left side. Additionally, for Winona, it required a very immediate transition from bereaved daughter to full-time caregiver. Winona held off on discussing her husband's illness. Initially, she disclosed it was startling to learn that he had lost the use of his left side. For decades, fans had witnessed Cactus accompanying her on stage, playing drums and moving fluidly, giggling with her while she performs. He was more than just her spouse. He was a member of the display. All of a sudden, he was a man who needed help simply to get from one room to another. It was a huge change. Winona clarified that their house needed to be remodeled to make room for his new requirements for mobility. Specialized tools, grips, and ramps were incorporated into their everyday life. However, the emotional toll was even more severe. In one especially unvarnished instance, she talked of holding him up physically while they were in the shower so he wouldn't tumble. She replied softly, "We should be doing this at 80. Not right now." Everything is encapsulated in that line. It goes beyond simply being sick or disabled. It's about time lost, about having your routine, your plans, your future was abruptly altered. The majority of spouses become ready for the prospect of late caregiving. In life, following many years of marriage, Winona and Cactus were scheduled to tour, perform, living. Instead, she discovered that she was learning how to manage therapies, provide,